Welcome back, Perfect Peeps, to Purrfect.dev. Today we're talking about creating great e-commerce with Jamstack, and I have two wonderful guests with me. I have Flor Antara and James Vidler. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining
Just
us.
on the big screen here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So just kind of a little bit of background on each. Flor is a full stack engineer at ZipWhip, and she is also a Jamstack advocate. Apart from organizing the Jamstack Seattle meetup, she's always experimenting with something, creating prototypes, bringing ideas to life, and sharing around what she's learned. James is the VP of product at Agility CMS. And if you follow along with our podcast, we also had someone else from Agility not that long ago on the pod as well. So definitely check that out. I'm just going to drop that in and hopefully people go search through.
Sure.
James also loves working with VR when he's not busy speaking and working with Agility.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you again. Anything else I'm missing? I always have to ask our guests. I feel like I always miss something. Feel like we got it.
Great.
Awesome.
Well, I think the only thing I'll mention is like my colleague who's been on here before, Joel Vardy. People often get me and him confused because my name is James Vidler, his is Joel Vardy. It's the same initials.
JV.
It's not the first time it's happened, and also our CEO's initials, John Voight, is also JV. So we're just a bunch of people. Sometimes we just get mixed into the same person in some people's view.
Oh my goodness.
So that's kind of funny. When I was doing the kind of the back grooming and trying to like research individuals both for this pod and the last one we did on Agility, I looked for Voight and it of course brought up the movie actor. And so I was like, I was totally thrown off, and now that totally clicks in. Makes much more sense.
He says he still uses that to this day to get good restaurant reservations ahead of time.
That's
awesome.
amazing. So yeah, the reason that we brought both James and Flor on the podcast today, both of you are both excited about, but also kind of experts in the e-commerce space. So I'm really excited to have you both on and kind of break down for our listeners a little bit more on where e-commerce is heading, especially here in 2021. Some things are cooking and changing like crazy. So as I mentioned prior to the podcast kicking off, Brittney is definitely more of a expert on the e-commerce side from our team. So I'll probably have Brittney run a lot of this show, and I'll just pop in occasionally and be in the background here. So
throw in some insights.
Yeah. So thanks.
All right,
again.
so
I'll let you kick it off.
All right. So creating great Jamstack sites. Some people may think that the Jamstack can't do e-commerce because it's supposed to be static pages, right? So how do we get that dynamic functionality that a shopping site needs? I'll start with James.
Sure. And I think one of the sort of short answer is there's many different ways, but that's also can be kind of confusing for people. So hopefully, myself and Flor can shed some light on that. Yeah, I mean, you can, just because your page is static doesn't mean that everything on your website needs to be static. A lot of people are already familiar with the concept of, hey, I have this page that I'm going to render, and then I also need to go and fetch some other data on the client to do things like pagination and, other sort of, client server interactivity. It's essentially the exact same concept. So you sort of choose the content that is going to be static and not change very often. So that's usually like content and that kind of thing. But, things like prices or things like product information that may be a little bit more dynamic, you'd essentially just make sure you don't include that in your actual static build, and instead you actually try to pull that on the client side when you're actually loading the page. So you can sort of like have your product page with some basic product details, but then also pull in your sort of e-commerce data on the front end to actually populate that dynamic data.
Okay, maybe Flor can talk about what are some of the tools that we can use then to do some of those dynamic pieces.
Yeah, well, so those dynamic tools or that dynamic aspect will fit into the A of the Jamstack, so the APIs aspect of that.
Mhm.
And so for that, there's actually a bunch of tools out there. There are some that we are more familiarized with, like Shopify, BigCommerce, and there are other players out there that are creating e-commerce solutions. definitely, for anyone listening, a quick search on that will give you a list of things that you can use. But there are a lot of APIs that we can use to integrate. And we're going to talk more about the sort of different integration aspects that you can do. You can do something very simple, and you can do a more complex integration if that's what you're looking for. So there's actually a lot of tools that sort of will provide a different solution for you. So it's a great time to go out there and look for tools to do this, because there are a lot of companies and kind of brands taking care of that aspect. And how part of the API aspect of the Jamstack is, let those guys take care of that thing that they do very well, just like, all of the e-commerce thing in this case. So e-commerce is really complicated, it's super complex. So the idea is that, you sort of hands off all the complexity into those tools. So that's why this is such an interesting approach to how to do e-commerce, because you don't have to actually maintain all that complexity and all those tools and all that infrastructure and whatnot. So it's super powerful.
Yeah, and just to add to that, what's good about that is, like, for a lot of these sort of e-commerce platforms that are out there, is they're going to give you an API to use to do all the things you need to do for your shopping cart stuff, right? It's going to be like you're going to have an API call to add something to your cart, to check out, all of those sort of things. So you don't have to write that code from scratch. And Flor touched on a little bit. There's some companies that we like to talk about a little bit. It's like there's Snipcart, and there's Big Commerce is another one, or even just Shopify, using Shopify as sort of a headless e-commerce solution. And so as a developer, you can essentially write your own code on the front end to use their APIs to, like, add something to your cart and use their API to sort of persist the cart kind of thing. But there's also other solutions like Snipcart, which are actually a lot easier to do, where you sort of you just add some JavaScript snippet into your site, and it just like automatically creates a cart around you, and it's sort of a little more magical. And I know we did a webinar in the past, and we talked about how cool that was. So there are a few different ways to set that up.
Snipcart is a very good option to just kind of drop in. It's pretty easy. With all those platforms that you said that are out there, cost can be a big factor with those. So it could be a bit expensive for small businesses. What would some options be? Would Snipcart be one of the options, or what could they use to start out if they wanted to avoid some of those bigger costs with like Shopify and BigCommerce?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So I think that, if I was a person that I was creating a brand, or like a company, and I need to start selling things, there's a few questions that I would start asking myself at the moment when I decide to, I need to start selling online. The first thing is, how many products do you actually have? Because that sometimes it's going to affect how the pricing, the pricing points and the tool that you're going to use for that. If you start off, with 400 products, you are probably going to need a more robust, e-commerce solution, because you have a lot of products, and you need to, have at least, a dashboard where you can handle all of them. But if you are, a small business that you have, 4 or 6 or maybe 10, between 10 and 20 products, something, reasonable, small amount of products, you can, integrate a simplest or quickest e-commerce integrations, such as these ones that we started calling like add-on e-commerce solutions, which is like if you want, you just create your product in your web page, and then you provide a way for your users to pay for that. So that's one. So I think that the two simplest things that you can do, depending on the on your technical level, because there's this other thing, your technical level, and also the time that you have to integrate the e-commerce and start selling things. I think that the two things that fit there are this add-on e-commerce, if you have some technical knowledge and time to implement that, and a website already that you can hook those things into. And there's also the regular all-in-one solution that you can use, such as Shopify. You open up a website, like an account with them. They will give you a domain. They will give you a dashboard where you can upload everything. It's not the Jamstacky way of doing it, I would say, but that's, if I was like a small business starting to sell things, that's probably the first thing that I would think of, because that's the quickest thing. If I had some time and some technical knowledge, I would try to implement one of these add-on solutions. And if I had more time, and even if I have more products and needed this more robust solution, I would start implementing something like Ecommerce or Shopify, where they give you, apart from all the API to integrate, they will give you a dashboard on their own platform where you can go and handle all the orders, the stock, and whatnot. I love Snipcart because it's like a mix of both things. It's super quick to integrate. It's like an add-on, like you just, as James said, you just put a script there and configure quick things, and you already hooked in your products to the e-commerce part. And the e-commerce part is that they also provide you with the dashboard where you can log in and see the orders and handle all that. So I think that Snipcart is a great mix of both those worlds. So there's that. Anything that you might want to add, James?
Actually, I think it kind of depends, like, where you're at as a company, in terms of if you're getting into like, hey, I want to start selling something, right? Because like, if you already have, let's say you're a small business, you already have a brochure style website, right? If you have a developer or someone who's just maybe a little tech savvy, that might be just enough to be like, okay, well, let's take your existing site and let's just add some buy buttons on here. And you could set that up with Snipcart, or you could set that up with even something like PayPal, where it's like you don't really need to do a whole lot. You just need to sort of like put some HTML in a certain way and set up a few things.
That's something I was going to ask. Do you actually need a developer to use something like Shopify or BigCommerce, or those all-in-one solutions?
Well, a lot of the all-in-one solutions, you don't really need a developer, but to customize certain things to how you want to look and that kind of thing, you probably still need a developer, right?
They have themes, right?
They have themes and stuff. So you can certainly choose something that's sort of out of the box and is going to give you something cookie cutter. So like, I would say if you're a small business and you want to start selling stuff and you don't even have your own website right now, like going with something like a BigCommerce or a Shopify is going to probably get your site up and running and selling stuff faster than anything else, and probably cheaper than anything else. At a certain point, you may grow to where that product maybe doesn't fit your needs anymore. Maybe you do need to bring in someone to start customizing things for you. So there is that, but I'm always a big fan of iterating, right? Like, there's no sense of trying to be like, hey, I'm going to build this thing that's going to last forever and it's going to do everything for me. Like, you're never going to get your store launched. So pick something small and easy, and you also get a chance to play around with it, right? Like, you decide you want to start selling something. You don't want to invest $100,000 and realize, oh, shoot, I didn't make enough in sales and I just lost all that money, right? So try to experiment, as cheap as you can. Sometimes going, not necessarily with Jamstack e-commerce is a decent route if you don't have a developer available.
Yeah, if you have a developer, maybe you would have more upfront cost to pay the developer to like create something with Snipcart, but maybe less long-term cost. And instead of going with something like Shopify where you're just paying monthly, you may not have the business for that. Just measuring your needs, right?
Yeah, and that's a great point, like the cost part, because I mean, it is super quick and fast to get one of those all-in-one solutions ready, but then I think that at the end of the road, you'll end up spending more on that monthly subscription, because they also take like a commission of every sale, and you also pay for the payment transaction, so everything adds up. And on top of that, if you're concerned about, performance and whatnot, and want to start having more flexibility on your website, I think that at that moment, you can start thinking about moving out of that all-in-one solution and probably going to a Jamstack approach where it will give you that flexibility and that performance and all those good things that we know. So the cost part, like it's super tempting to jump into an all-in-one solution, but it's something that, you know, usually people, I don't think that they evaluate or not, but I'm saying it's important that you evaluate that when you're thinking about that long term. Like how I think it's great if you're thinking about having it for a few months, a year, but then start planning about moving out, because sometimes it can end up being super expensive.
Is there a given point where there's so many products or variations on a product that, you know, any of these solutions will fall over and you have to start to look at something like, I don't know, Adobe AEM or something major like that? Is there like a guideline at all for like what that number is, or do you have to kind of find that out yourself? I'll throw that one at James. He seemed to smile on it.
I'm just smiling because that's a pretty tough question to answer.
Yeah.
I mean,
I can tell you some of my past experience. So I used to be SAP ABAP developer, right? And we actually worked for maybe not the chair that Brittney's sitting in, but some of the big office furniture manufacturers in West Michigan. And once you got a single chair out, a single chair can have multi-million variations that come out of it, right? And so if you are trying to sell that and you need to like put a red on it, and then you need to adjust the arm, and then it needs to and all of a sudden it's exponential, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of these kind of smaller versions of these e-commerce sites, they cannot handle that even out of the box. Like if you're just selling a widget and you have one picture of that thing, like that's totally fine. Or if you have a t-shirt you want to sell in 6 sizes, that's fine. Is there a point in there though you really have to go, this is not going to work, we need to actually pay the big bucks?
Yeah, I think as soon as you sort of run into those complexities and you realize that, you know, the hacks you're doing to get around that is causing you even a bigger headache, it's probably a good time to reevaluate and say, okay, maybe we need to sort of move up to the big boys kind of thing, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that, Jamstack doesn't have a place, right?
Yeah.
You know, we're looking at things like BigCommerce, which actually historically has been like a monolithic sort of e-commerce rollout solution, but they have a headless offering now. So you can sort of, and that's sort of what's great about just Jamstack in general is, you know, it's for the people that want to pick and choose the best of breed services that they want to sort of mesh together, right?
Mhm.
And so they have more control of those things. Some people don't want that control and would rather just like, I just want one thing to do everything for me, and I want one person to contact support. And that's fine. You know, there's always going to be a place for that. But I think if you find yourself in the camp where you like to tinker and you like to sort of always be on top of the latest things, and then Jamstack is a great opportunity for you because you can really pick and choose how your even your e-commerce works. You could actually do something where you build a Jamstack site, start off with something like Snipcart because it takes it maybe a couple hours to set up kind of thing to actually start selling things. And then later on you realize, okay, I've outgrown Snipcart and I can kind of move on to something else. You could actually just sort of, take your existing site that you've already built in Jamstack and then just integrate that with the whatever headless API solution you want to go with. So you can sort of maintain your website, but still just swap out the e-commerce piece, right? As opposed to being like, well, we got to rebuild our entire website now on this whole other platform, and that becomes a huge other project, right?
You just figure out what works for you in that specific moment. That's what is so great about the Jamstack.
Yeah, and can I say something? It's very interesting what James just brought up, that BigCommerce and also like Shopify and other tools like Square started having this foundation on top of the monolithic approach, right? But then they started having this headless solution as the second offering there, and in some of them also even have the add-on or like buy button that you can just implement. So you can sort of like go and pick one of these tools and start loading all your products there, and maybe start having an all-in-one solution, which again, it might start being a little bit more expensive, because if you think about it, with the all-in-one solution, they are also offering you the front end and everything like pretty much ready for you. So they make sure that they get that, they charge you for that. They take away all that complexity for you, but you have to pay for that. But the great thing is that since they also have the headless like offering, you can at some point keep all your products on their tool, but then start connecting them through the API. And in that case, I believe that in the case of Shopify, you would start with I don't remember the name of the plans, but with the plan where you pay for the all-in-one, but then you will sort of downgrade to the least expensive plan, right? Because you are going to implement all that complexity on your side, but still use their sort of backend for managing all the products and the orders and whatnot. So there's that option also, like start with the quickest and easiest thing and then grow like from there, integrate it when you're ready.
So using it almost as a CMS then.
Right, exactly.
And just
using it almost as a CMS. Yes.
Gotcha. And that's probably a good place to say, how does building an e-commerce site with the Jamstack differ from something like WordPress? And Flor, you can go ahead and answer that one since you're up there.
All right. Yes. So for WordPress, which is like a one of the monolithic solutions out there, you're usually going to have everything living in that same website. You can also hook in Shopify like through a plugin and have all the products living somewhere else. So there's some integrations of WordPress and through plugins that would let you kind of put that complexity out in some tools, but usually you're gonna have everything living in that same monolith thing. I think that it's not WordPress. It usually goes with this WooCommerce plugin for handling all the products and whatnot. It's usually a great tool. It has a great UI and a great UX and all that. But I think that it's interesting, and I think it's the easiest thing to think about when you start, about having an e-commerce. So it's either Shopify all-in-one or WordPress with WooCommerce. I feel like that's the go-to for most people, and what clients or like non-technical people know, and they will ask you as the developer for. But I think that as developers, we have the responsibility, and we have this place now of showing them all the other options that they have, and the pros and cons. Like, you can have WordPress with WooCommerce and everything that you want, but let's think about performance. Let's think about costs, because we need to pay for hosting for all that. So at that point, I would say, lay everything on the table and do pros and cons about everything, performance, costs, and everything that might be, important.
Everything has a trade-off, right? Yeah,
exactly. That's a great point. Also, it's impossible that it's, everything perfect. It's either going to be more expensive but faster to implement, or the other way around. So it's different things are important for different projects.
And James, when you're kind of coming from a CMS project, how much in that product are you guys thinking about e-commerce and how it has to plug into that system?
Well, I can tell you that we've been thinking about it for a very long time, and in fact, we actually at one point built our own e-commerce system into our platform. That was maybe four or 5 years ago or so. And then eventually we decided we should focus on CMS. There's lots of other great other headless e-commerce solutions out there. We probably don't need to also enter this space. So it's a strategic decision to sort of put that offering on the side. But it's very important. A lot of our customers come to us and say, hey, I got this site working right now, and it's either one of our customers directly, or it's the developer that's working for them being like, hey, how do I I need to sell some stuff, and we're using your CMS. Do you guys have something sort of built in? And that's sort of what initially caught our conversation of being like, maybe if we had our own built-in e-commerce thing, then we could then we'd be like the place for you to come.
Yeah.
But we sort of changed our the way we thought about that, because we don't want to become a place that is an all-in-one platform that has everything. We are firm believers, and the same reason why we like Jamstack is because you can pick and choose the best of breed solutions you want to choose. And we said, okay, let's build the best headless CMS out there.
Doing one thing really well.
Doing one thing really well. Let's not try to do everything really well, and let's not, let's not cut any corners on an e-commerce solution either, because that could have some pretty serious ramifications there. So and the funny thing though is that we actually had built that solution as if it was an external system. So we wanted to do that, to be like, okay, so we built our own, this is how it would work. But if we didn't build our own, we would just swap this out and put in any other system in there and make sure that sort of worked. So through that exercise, we learned a lot about that. And that pretty much with any headless CMS, you can integrate with other headless e-commerce systems pretty easily. And there's a few different ways to do it. But I mean, generally speaking, at some point you do have to communicate with the e-commerce provider. And so, for example, like Snipcart is, you could easily set up your website to pull all of your page tree and all the pages that are in your sitemaps and generate all your pages from all the content you have in the CMS, but then use Snipcart on the front end to sort of add buy buttons and things and allow this sort of shopping cart functionality. We've also helped other customers in the past build Shopify integrations where they can build a custom field in the CMS where they can actually go and query products and stuff from Shopify using the API, so that when editors are in the CMS, they may not be able to modify, and they probably don't want them modifying the prices of things and stuff too, because that's all an external system. But you do want your marketers to be able to update images and copy and all that kind of stuff, all that sort of metadata that you really want to have around those products. So they can do that in your CMS, and then you link that content to the actual Shopify entity that you want. So the product, for example. So they can sort of be like, all right, this is the content for this Shopify product. And then on the front end, on the developer side, you're like, okay, I'm going to get, let's say you're building a site in Gatsby. It goes through a build process. You're going to source the content from Agility. And then you'll be like, oh, okay, I got these Shopify IDs. Now I'm going to go source this content from Shopify. And I can merge them together and then show them on my front end, and then have some APIs on the front end to add products to carts and that kind of thing.
So does having all of these pieces add so much complexity and places that you have to go? How do we get to a place where we can say, I want to go to this place and add my content and I want it to just work? So how are we going to get to that point, and what can we use to do that?
One tool that comes to mind is Stackbit. So Stackbit, it's one of the tools that I'm keeping a close eye on the Jamstack ecosystem, because their whole idea is bring all of the Jamstack tools and features and APIs that you're using into one place. So you will have that just one tool where you are going to be able, you are able already, it's out there, you can go ahead and try it out. And then you can, work in their, sort of dashboard. They provide a live editor that's great. And then under the hood, they are doing all the connections for, your e-com, your CMS, any other API that you're using, but they sort of like hook that in all together for you, and you just work on one place. So I think that it's super powerful, and that we all need to keep an eye on it, because I think it's going to, sort of solve that gap that, it was that WordPress was solving, or like any other one of those, monolith things, solutions, that the main thing what you would think about going into one of those solutions is because of that, because you had everything in one place. So that's like the good and the bad of the monolith approach. Like you have everything there, great, but also bad. Like you have everything there. But with this, you still have everything separate. You are still using Agility for your CMS, Shopify for your, but they put everything together and just go there. And they have collaboration. You can have users and whatnot. So I would say keep an eye on that.
A lot of times, like I'll like keep myself awake at night going, wait a minute, this Jamstack thing's amazing and I love it and we talk about it every day. But every time like we start to dive into it, it's like, But how do we bring it all together? Could we like have plugins and could we have a unified? And I'm like, wait a
I
minute, am
know.
I just talking about WordPress all over again? And so
Yes, exactly.
it's kind of
Yes,
one of
I
those
know.
things.
It's just, it's the Jamstack is just going to become like WordPress, and there's going to be something else that just comes up again, right? It's called like
Yeah.
It's so hard to think about that way. Like, how can we be extensible and yet like consolidated for, you know, each individual marketer or like someone actually doing the content, right?
Because it is a lot of pieces, right? It really allows us to create whatever we want or need for the project, but it's a lot of technical debt, just like decisions to make and things to add. So we've touched a little bit on Snipcart. Have either of you ever used shopping cart?
I haven't.
No, I have not. No.
Have you?
Nick DeJesus created shopping cart, and it was originally for React, and he has recently switched it to Redux, and we've talked about it on the podcast before. But it is almost like Snipcart, but it allows you to just store a shopping cart and use that with Stripe and create a shopping cart solution. So that is another thing that we could integrate in. And
so it's even more abstracted, kind of.
Yeah.
Not exactly tied to a specific platform, right?
Yeah, it's completely framework agnostic. I'm actually working on a site where I'm just building HTML vanilla JavaScript and putting shopping cart in there and just hooking into Stripe's API. And I'm actually planning on just using Stripe as my CMS. So I'm going to add products to Stripe and it's going to pull everything in from Stripe. So that's my one source of truth, kind of.
Nice.
Well, if you need some some other content that Stripe may not provide in the interface, well, that's where a headless CMS might come into play to also help you with the other content.
So, what would a headless CMS add for Stripe? Like, what are those differences that you're talking about? What?
Yeah, so actually that's a good point. You brought that up. So so like you're saying, you're using Stripe as a CMS. So Stripe has the concept of like products. It has the concept of orders and subscriptions and probably some other stuff I'm not even aware of. It's been a bit since I've looked at it, but it doesn't really have a place for things being like what's your homepage title going to be, what's your meta description that you're going to use on your homepage, what pages are you going to have in your sitemap, what banner is going to be on the front page of your site that isn't really about selling a product necessarily. It could be about something else entirely different. So that's where headless CMS can come into play, where you can create any sort of structure of content you want, and then that way you're sort of covered. So the idea is like on the front end when you're displaying something, every single piece of content you see, you should be able to go and just change as a marketer. Now, if you're just building a site for yourself and you're a developer, that's probably overkill. You probably don't need a CMS for that. You're probably just as comfortable going into your GitHub repo and just make a quick update, right?
But if you're a freelancer and handing this off to a client, you want to be able for them to update their stuff. So that's a great option for that. So what about delivering the product? So Shopify and the big all-in-ones allow us to do everything. They ship it for you. They handle like emails, I think, and all of that. So what are some of the options that as developers that we could do ourselves for shipping and contacting? Flor, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yes. I actually don't know of anyone that a tool that can help you do that just as a developer, like an integration or something. If there's something out there, I'd love to know. In my experience, either store owners either use the solutions from Shopify or those tools, or they just receive the order and just leave the order in the dashboard, and they handle all the shipping and all the fulfillment parts their own. And it's very different in every scenario. So I haven't found like a one way that everyone does it. It's different depending on if it's a small company, if you're an entrepreneur, if you have a big commerce thing. That's in my experience.
I think it depends on what you're doing too. I know there's ones like Printful and Printify. If you're like actually getting stuff printed, that will ship stuff for you. And then there's products like Mailgun that will do emails and things of that nature. But I don't know of anyone that would like ship out just your own products for you. Like if you were creating your own kind of Etsy store thing and you wanted to company to ship your products for you. I don't know of
Yeah,
one
like
that would
Right.
do that.
And even with Etsy, like some like people, at least the store owners that I know, they receive the order in Etsy and they do all the fulfillment on their own. Like they put the thing in a box and they take it to, the mail and
Yeah, you have
deliver
to do
it.
that yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's certainly.
So-
It looks like there are some companies. I'm actually just really curious. So I just put up a Google search. But like, there are some companies who are looking to starting to specialize in this, where it's like, yeah, they sort of handle your entire fulfillment service. So like, they'll take the order in, they'll source the thing, and they'll ship it, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, because when you
That's
start,
interesting.
yeah, I haven't personally used any of the services or anything, so I can't comment on that. Although I have to say, when we built our e-commerce system, we had to build that in mind too, and it's really complicated. You don't want to do that custom if you
called
can,
drop
if you have
shipping?
any other choice. Drop shipping, yeah.
Yeah, is that it?
Drop
Okay.
shipping. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's also kind of what Amazon does too. That just one way if you can sell stuff is just sign up for Amazon and sell it on Amazon. They'll also do that for you.
We've kind of touched around this topic a little bit, but pulling all of these things together leads to a lot of choices and integration. So at what point do we just say it's easier for us to use an all-in-one instead of pulling in all this different stuff?
Yeah, I would say pricing is going to be an important point there. Like, if at some point you identify that it's being way too more expensive than you expected, that's probably one aspect. Then the other one is so usually when you have one of these all-in-one solutions, they're going to give you a domain that's going to be different from your brand website. So it's going to be so your storefront is going to live completely in a different domain than your brand website. Might be okay for your brand, but at some point it might start being, hey, we actually want the thing integrated to have a seamless experience and whatnot. So that's the other thing, the domain part. And then I think the third one is, that flexibility of, the look and feel and the performance and all that. So I think that's sort of the inflection point where you say, I need to move out of the all-in-one and go through a different approach and have more flexibility for costs or whatever.
Is there any way? So we talked a little bit about kind of Brittney using Stripe as a CMS or something like that. A lot of times what I run into on different projects is we actually use Cloudinary a lot. On CodingCAD we use it and everything else. I find that at least that way you can load a single file. And if you have a CMS where you can load up to like Cloudinary itself, then you can use that link across all of these other products. Is there a way to look at that from an e-commerce perspective where you almost flip it on its head and you say, okay, I have kind of this image that I'm keeping in a CMS, and maybe this is what Snipcart does, I'm just not used to it. But I just need like buttons to drive home this whole shopping experience after that. Is that what you would end up using that for?
Yeah. So you could, using something like Snipcart or even like PayPal buttons, or I think Shopify also has buttons. You could use a CMS to create all the structured fields you want. So you're like, all right, I'm going to put a field for this is my product image. This is my dimensions of the product. You could even construct your own concept of a variation if you really wanted to, right? And then on the front end, when you're displaying that, you sort of put some attributes, usually in HTML, to sort of say like, hey, this is my product image, and this is my title, and this is my description, and this is my price. And then those services like Snipcart, PayPal, or Shopify will sort of ingest that information and build up their own like internal database of like, right, they sort of keeps that data in sync. So it's like, all right, this is the person's products. They're not actually defined in the system first. They're defined in your system first, and then you tell the e-commerce website that these are my products. So then that way you actually have full control over all of the content in one place, which is really nice. But to your point, Alex, I think you mentioned before was I forgot my train of thought there. It was,
I think my biggest part was like on the Cloudinary, when you start to like utilize those images across different places and things like that. What I've been running into, which is a little frustrating, is like I almost have to start duplicating where that content belongs. I think the buttons and building their own database up, like that's really good to understand. However, I think there's kind of also this progression where it's getting increasingly complex for these checkout systems. So like when we're using Stripe on our site now, like I don't want to handle any of that, because it's, how do I now integrate my Apple checkout, and how do I stay up with the EU regulations and all of that stuff? So now I take like, okay, you can add a membership, but once you're like kind of into that mode of checkout, like I'm pushing you over Stripe. Well, now when I'm in Stripe, like I want to make sure that image matches the product you're actually checking out on, and things like that. And it starts to become difficult to like say, okay, I have one kind of golden copy of all of my content, and I'm pushing you to all these other different places. I feel like that part of the Jamstack, there's something that's getting lost a little bit, because yeah, you do have these best of breeds, but each best of breed doesn't cover the full like thought as you flow through.
And doesn't communicate well with the other pieces.
Yeah.
There's so much duplication that occurs.
So what you're finding is like maybe on your marketing site or something, you might have a picture of a product and a button to the product, and then that goes to Shopify. That Shopify, you need to have that exact same image sort of set up in Shopify, otherwise it won't look correct in the cart, kind of thing. Is that what
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
I think that's probably why Brittney started to use like Stripe more as
the exact reason,
CMS
because
thing,
I had an image that I was using and it wasn't matching my Stripe image, or it wasn't like filtered the exact way. And so if I just pull my image from Stripe, I don't have to worry about that.
Right.
So it just lives in Stripe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at some point you gotta decide what's the source of truth here, right? And yeah, and the way that we actually had built like our own e-commerce system with our own integration is what we did there is we sort of said, okay, there's going to be like a separation of concerns. There's going to be like the regular CMS content for this product, which is going to be the title, image, description, and then any other custom fields you might think of. And then there's the e-commerce data for that product, which in theory could live anywhere. In our case, it lived in a different database, but it could live anywhere. Once you sort of make that distinction to be like, okay, these fields are here and these fields are here, it became pretty simple, because the only e-commerce fields that we sort of, if people would ever set, are like price, SKU, dimensions, weight, and then some variation stuff.
I think what can get difficult even in that, though, a lot of times in your CMS, you'll say, okay, this widget is $10. And then when you go to check out, you're kind of firing that off to like, let's say a Stripe. Well, now I need to make sure I updated my products over in Stripe for $10. Yeah. But then when there's a price update, who's updating both sides of that equation, right? And keeping those in sync. And that's the part that becomes a little challenging. Go ahead, Flor.
Interesting. So you guys have all the data like loaded in your website, CMS, whatever you're using, and also loading, like duplicating it on Stripe.
Yep. Because we work through Stripe's like full checkout process on their side.
Interesting.
I've always seen that done on WordPress as well. Like even in WooCommerce, they're like, do you want to add some buttons? Cool. Add products, put the pricing in. But then the CMS of WordPress also has, oh, well, here's the copy for that, and put your price right here so it looks good. So it's like this thing that's
interesting. That creates that disconnection. But have you guys thought of or started implementing the Stripe? I believe it has an API with your website, so kind of start consume that. So the source of truth for your price and your image actually is in Stripe.
So it's kind of the challenge becomes, so for instance, let's say in our CMS, or whatever, wherever we're storing that, let's call it a CMS. We have like this product out there, and we know like we want to set the correct copy and all the images and stuff like that. If you just tied it to Stripe API and said, here's the product API, let's say, like now that you have that, it's cool. And when you click, add to my cart or whatever, when you go to the final checkout, almost like Stripe for sure is pushing pretty heavily to get you checking out on their site.
Because
once you're over there, you lose that same like here's my look and feel to my site and everything like that.
Yeah.
And
I
if
see.
you don't keep your images up to date on that side, someone's like, oh, that got really weird for me. And it breaks that kind of checkout flow down. So it's just kind of interesting. And that's why I think like Brittney loves Snipcart, like you talk about it all the time, like how great it is. So being able to kind of flow within your own site and kind of keeping that content in one area, there's
use
kind
shopping
of
cart?
pros and cons.
I mean, I do like Snipcart. It does add, I think, 3% extra fee. So you get a 3% fee from Snipcart and a 3% fee from Stripe if you use that. Snipcart is, I think it's a modal, right? It just drops in and then it's on your current site. So you can style it however you want. They do have like a base styling that you get with it, but you can update that to look kind of, so it looks and feels more like your site than
That's
something
correct.
like,
Yeah, it does seem to. It's a little more like seamless. We found, yeah.
once you go, it uses Stripe too, because you integrate Snipcart with Stripe on the back end, and then it still pushes you to Stripe though.
Does it
And
really?
so does use shopping cart. So it still pushes you to
Huh.
Stripe. You're still going to end up with that second screen because
Huh.
Stripe handles it. So they want it to be hosted by them because they handle all that back end processing. So it has to. Like there's no
Right.
way to really get away from that I know of.
I think maybe I put some words in your mouth. I didn't mean to. What's the other product that doesn't have the fee that you always talk
Use
about?
shopping cart. Yeah, that's what I said. Is use shopping cart the one that you were referring
Yeah,
to?
that's the one I'm thinking of.
That is, I like Snipcart too. It adds the extra fee. So I use both, but I think they both give you the shopping cart feel for your site, but still once you go to payment, use shopping cart uses redirect to checkout and it will send you to Stripe.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So it's still the same page.
Same thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. And like obviously like Stripe has become kind of the biggest power player in the Jamstack space for checkouts for a very good reason. I mean, they're really good at what they do. Cool. Well, I think we've kind of covered all the pros and cons and the ins and outs of Jamstack API. So it's probably time for one of my favorite parts of the show for our Purrfect Picks. James, you are the lucky winner to go first today, and
All
you
right.
have a pretty fun pick if you ask me.
Yeah, I have to say I certainly slept on this one while it was on the air, but episodes starring Matt LeBlanc, yes, Joey from Friends. Actually, interesting poster they put here. He's completely hidden.
I know. He's like the feature of the show, right?
He must not be very happy about that. But I know I have to say the show is hilarious, and it's just it follows this premise of these two British TV show writers who wrote this brilliant award-winning show in Britain, and then so this Hollywood executive sort of lures them over to Hollywood to say, hey, like I want you to do the exact same show you did in Britain. I want you to do it right here. It's going to be a great success. But he's a little nuts, and he ends up hiring Matt LeBlanc as the sort of lead role, and it doesn't fit the role at all. And then the whole show changes from being this. It's originally supposed to be this like heartwarming show about a boarding school and the headmaster. It turns into a show called Pucks, which is about a hockey coach coaching a hockey team, and Matt LeBlanc is the lead, and he actually plays himself in the show, and it's just it's awesome.
Funny.
That's the part that people love. They're like, yeah, Matt's Matt. It's hilarious.
It's got 5 seasons too. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah.
Certainly worth it. It's unfortunately it's not on the air anymore, but
5 seasons though.
5 seasons, yeah.
Good run. That's some good hours of
It is.
wasted life. No. Okay, Flor is up next. And I think she might have mentioned her first pick a little bit already.
Yeah, not that I'm a fan or anything, but I just want everyone to keep an eye on this Stackbit tool and platform, because I think that it comes to solve a really interesting flaw that we have on the Jamstack, and it's the fact of they put everything together for us. They connect all those services behind the scenes for you. It's super nice and easy to interact with, and it's super easy to integrate your project into. So there's that. One note about that, I don't know when the live podcast is going to be actually released, guys, but the next Monday I'm going to be on the Boston meetup talking about Stackbit. So If you catch it live, great. If not, make sure that you look for that recording out there, because I'm going to be
We'll
showing
have
you.
to grab the link and add it in.
That's awesome.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay.
Cool.
And then there's if you guys can put links there, there's a great like tutorial that kind of brings together this Stackbit tool with Snipcart, which is one of the tools for ecom that we were talking about today. And they show you how to integrate the Snipcart e-commerce solution with the Stackbit tool, so you can have everything in one place, and it's great.
Oh, very cool.
Cool.
No, it's very interesting. And the third one, Jamstack related, is this remarkable device that I use. I've gone paperless for since 2 years ago or something. And I've been using this remarkable thing that I love. It's like an iPad kind of thing, but it's great to work with. It's just a note-taking device that it feels like you're writing on paper. It's so weird to write in it, because you hear the sound like of the pen. It's so satisfying.
I would say if you've watched the podcast before, or if you haven't, go to the Scott Dolinsky episode. He has actually a live version where he's writing on his for us. So
Yeah,
check
he
that
picked
out.
that too.
Nice.
It's
a great
clearly a good.
This keeps coming up, so it's got to be an amazing
There
product.
you go. It has something. Yeah, I love it. I don't have a pen around in my house. Real story. And it's great for taking notes or like whiteboarding. You can connect it to your computer. They have a whiteboard session. So if sometimes I'm on meetings and I share my screen and I'm actually drawing on that thing.
Oh, wow.
Really cool.
Or
I like
working
that.
remotely. Yeah, it solved that gap. So it's
I
great.
didn't know that.
Battery life is supposed to be great on those too, right? I've heard.
What is it?
Battery life?
Oh yeah, so this is the second version. I had the first one and now I have the second one. They improved the battery a lot. Like, it's crazy how they improved the battery life on this thing.
I think Scott
really
said
cool.
he goes like 3 weeks without a charge.
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
E-ink's amazing.
It's
I
like
think
the Kindle.
I think we were joking that if the Kindles had
Yeah.
this capability, they would have sold out completely.
Yeah.
It was
Awesome.
So, yeah,
Brittney,
there you go.
your pick is next.
Yeah, I went with a couple of tech ones today, just centered around the topic that we were on. So this is a blog post about learning how to accept money on the Jamstack sites in 38 minutes. And it's by Jason Lingstor from Netlify and Thor from Stripe. And they take you through, it's just an HTML page with vanilla JavaScript, and it uses Netlify serverless functions to send that data off to Stripe. And it's a really good post. I suggest you check that out.
I was about to ask you, like, why 38 minutes? And now I see like this video collection of 38 minutes.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. And my second pick is Jamstack Handbook by Colby Fayok, another person that we've had on the podcast talking about this book. And it has 3 tutorials inside of it that take you through setting up a Jamstack site with e-commerce solutions like Snipcart. And he uses AWS. He uses, trying to think of the other one. I think Netlify is the other one that he uses in there.
Yeah, I don't remember either. If you don't follow Colby on at least YouTube, I think he's on Twitch too. Absolute wonderful guy to follow and listen to his
That
tutorial.
book that you just went past too, he has a free book, 50 React projects for React and the static web. And that's completely free that he did.
Yeah,
So
that's
he's
good
really awesome.
Cool.
Great person to talk to too. I went completely non-technical. I just came back from spring break and kind of got a little lazy on my picks this week, but I always have to like pick something fun, and I signed up for a marathon in October. So if you're anywhere near the Michigan area, Sleeping Bear is a beautiful place in the fall. You get to see all the trees changing colors. I've run this marathon in the past, and it's all on a trail, and it's just.
I was going to say, is it on
gorgeous.
dunes? Because they're famous.
Yeah,
for
no
dunes.
dunes. No, it's
Like, no,
pretty
thank you.
flat. There's a couple hills that you have to deal with, but definitely no dune runs. You can go to the dune afterwards if you are really
Yeah.
looking to kill your calves.
So you're
But,
doing are you doing the full marathon or half marathon?
planning on doing the full.
Okay.
I'm doing a half after this comes out, but Louisville half marathon is next week, so I'm doing that one in preparation for it.
Nice.
Super fun picks. Thank you so much for filling those out. I know it can be a little challenging sometimes to come up with things that you've been checking out. So really appreciate you both for coming on the pod again. It's so much fun to like have others to talk through this stuff and just kind of get different perspectives coming in. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
appreciate
Thank you,
having you.
Alex, Brittney, and
Yeah,
James.
thank you, Flor and James.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, see ya.
Take care.
All right,
Take
thanks,
care.
guys.